High Performance Podcast. My name is Jack McLean. Today is a solo episode all about what is an Australian AFL rules strength and conditioning coach. I've got 6 years experience across at the Hawthorn Football Club and the Melbourne Football Club, two prestige Melbourne-based, Victorian-based AFL football clubs. And I get this question quite often over the years. How does it differentiate to a trainer? What are the key responsibilities of an AFL strength and conditioning coach? What does a typical day look like in pre-season compared to in-season? And how do we contribute to the team and ultimately to the club's performance? I'll go into 4 key areas, which will be squad strength and conditioning, sports science, elite lifestyle, and how we individualize and collaborate with the rest of the staff to ultimately prepare the players for performance, and then a quick wrap up at the end. So we'll dive straight into it. If you're listening on Instagram or on YouTube, feel free to send through some questions. I'm happy to keep this dynamic and engaged. So if you've got any questions, comments, or queries, send them through, and I'll make sure to keep scrolling and checking in periodically throughout the episode. But we'll start with what are the 4 most important aspects of a AFL strength and conditioning coach. And to start with, number 1, it's the squad physical preparation, their strength and conditioning. So have they got enough body armor to handle the contact aspect of the game? Obviously, it's played at 360 degrees. You're going to get hit in all different directions when you're expecting contact, when you're not expecting contact. It's highly reactive and reflexive. So we need to make sure there's enough body armor, typically around the trunk and the neck, to be able to not only mitigate against contact-related injuries, but also to allow yourself to break through the tackle and create space with your contest strength. So body mass is important, and there's definitely a minimum amount that we need. But obviously, we don't want to maximize that and put on the most amount of muscle. So everyone is a little bit different in what their gym volume looks like across the week. Typically, we'll have most of the squad looking to maintain, certainly the experienced players that won't be their body mass due to having a number of pre-seasons and being in the system for a number of years, typically 4 years plus. They know what their weight is for game day and how to maintain that with good quality nutrition, sleeping habits, and of course, good training intensity in the gym. But for our developing players, typically they do need a bit of extra volume. So as strength and conditioning coaches, our job is to make sure that we're getting that volume in, but it's not taking away from the on-field performance of the football training program, particularly in preseason where the loads are incrementally increasing. And we know that the players are at higher risk, and we've got to get those loads in to prepare them to perform and be fit enough for the game model. But also to ensure that we can get enough work in the gym to be able to make adaptation, make change. So that's where the art comes into it, the programming, and also being informed from research. And Dean Ritchie, who's been on the podcast, has done some great research with his PhD at the Gold Coast Suns around what's the maximum amount of distance that a developing player can do, which off the top of my head, it was 25 Ks. If they do more than 25 Ks in a week, it becomes really hard to be in a anabolic state where we can put on muscle mass. So monitoring their GPS loads, what is the amount of work that the football coaches need to see from a drill point of view from those players, and making sure that we're ensuring of that 25K, majority of our GPS tickets are used in the football context, and that we're looking to get in the extra gym work, whether it be strength and power work when they're fresh pre-session. That's not going to take away from their field sessions. You might have a couple of exercises there. And then obviously the volume work as well, typically at the end of the week on a Saturday morning, or if you're not training the boys on a Saturday, Sunday, you could do it on the Friday afternoon, where you can get heaps of eccentric, hypertrophy, slow tempo work in that's going to elicit hypertrophy and muscle gain. So we can get that in a couple of days before they're next going to train on the Monday. So it's looking at your schedule, where you are in the season, in the preseason. Obviously, in-season becomes a lot trickier, particularly if players are playing at the highest level at AFL. We want to make sure we're maximizing their weekly performance, not only for themselves, but also for the team. We know with hypertrophy training that there is a residual fatigue effect with that. So if you're going to do it, you're probably going to do it earlier in the week, where it's the body's still in that recovery phase. It's not going to limit their ability to train, but also it's further enough from the upcoming game that's not going to affect their performance. So that becomes really agile. That's the body armor side of things. Then we've got our strength, our speed, our power, and our agility. So all our high intensity actions. As we know, the AFL game is getting faster and faster. And we're learning off sports like the NFL, like rugby league, about the importance of speed and being able to have that game speed. So speed and power, as well as our lateral work, our agility is becoming more and more important. And there's a big emphasis on that in AFL these days. So we're getting that work in ideally during the warm-up when the athletes are neurally fresh and they can attack it with good intensity. We've got themes to our program around that. So you might be going through more of a max velocity based phase in your program, and therefore you're stripping back the max strength in the gym during that phase. So we're not clashing there. And then there'll be other phases where we're focusing more on an acceleration block, their first 3 steps. And we know that strength and power can really help your body to be able to generate more force into the ground. So that's where we might be going through a harder gym block as they complement each other, those 2 qualities. So with the whole program from a physical point of view is connected. It's all working together, whether you have your speed coach, your gym coach, a high performance manager, and of course the medical team to be able to ensure that we're putting the best program in for that player so they can perform at a really high level. When it comes to their strength, we're back. Sorry about that. Wi-Fi just completely carked it, but back on track. So we're discussing strength training and the importance of having 2 hours between your field sessions and your gym. Sorry. 2 hours between our field session and your gym rotations in the afternoon. We know through the research any earlier than that, it's just going to limit the amount of weight that the boys are going to be able to lift, and girls for AFLW athletes. Now, if you listen to this for semi-pro community, clearly it's just a matter of getting the work in. So you won't be able to optimize necessarily, but it is more important to get a gym session in than get nothing in at all, of course. So if you don't have that opportunity to train in the mornings and get your body used to that and just be smart, so you do your strength and power work, your more performance oriented jumps and lifts in the morning, train in the afternoon, and then do your injury mitigation, your resilience work in the afternoons after the field session, because we know that can elicit some fatigue and put you at risk for injuries. So things like your Nordics, unilateral lifts like Bulgarian split squats and the like. So that's our strength program. So obviously the AFL Strength Conditioning coach, it's our role to make sure that we're getting in the adequate work at the right time throughout the week, on the right days. It aligns well with what the loads and the stress are from a physical point of view. It aligns well with where we're going in our preseason, where we're going with our in-season, taking into account in-season, of course, day turnarounds and travel. So we know that if the boys have only got a 6-day break, that we're going to have that minimum effective dose and make sure we get enough work in to keep moving the needle and still improve where we want to get to. But if it's but without obviously affecting their ability to perform on the game day. And we've also individualizing as well, which I'll touch on a little bit later on. But obviously, if your VFL boys or those not playing on AFL on the weekend, they might have an eight day or a 7 day. They might have completely different schedules. So you want to have a different program for them across the week, and that's our role. So that's the number one, our physical preparation. How are we ensuring that the group is ready to play the role for the team that the coaches want them to do? And do they have those physical capacities to be able to perform at a really high level and allow their strengths to be on show while reducing the risk of injury? Okay, so that's a big part of what we do. Number two, sports science, fancy word, bit of a buzzword, particularly in Australia. We've been leading the way over the last number of years now in this area. And due to probably the fact that we don't have the same amount of volume as other countries of elite talent. So we've got to make sure we look after the athletes that we do have and limit breaking them. So sports science has been at the forefront of how we do things as strength and conditioning coaches. We aren't necessarily in the role of a full-time sports scientist analyzing the data all throughout the day. There's typically at a club an AFL or known as a performance scientist at the club that will be analyzing the data. They're across the data. They're ensuring that the way that we test is reliable and valid, and they're feeding the information that's necessary to the analysts, the high performance staff, coaches. So they've got that ability to be able to visualize the data and tell a story, and also feed the information through to the medical team. But as strength and conditioning coaches, we're keen on the load monitoring, so using GPS to be able to track how far players are running, how fast they're running, and making sure that particularly our faster players, they're hitting above 90% of max velocity once or twice a week. They're getting above 95% velocity on a fortnightly basis, whether it be in the game or in training. And we're just monitoring their exposure, so days since they last hit 95%, and ensuring that doesn't stretch out to like 30 days before they've had a true sprint effort, because we know that the hamstrings are most activated above that 95%, and hip flexors. So to reduce the risk of hamstrings, which are highly prevalent in AFL, we want to ensure we're constantly exposing the athletes to that stress. That's the number one when it comes to hamstrings. We can do all the Nordics and Romanian deadlifts and mobility work and pelvic control, trunk discipline work. But if we aren't exposing the athletes to speed, we're putting we're doing them a disservice, essentially, putting them at risk. It's also a really important performance metric. As I mentioned, the AFL game's only getting faster. So we make sure that we're training speed and developing speed, particularly just like with the strength and the body armor, those that need it. If the coaches have identified players that just simply aren't fast enough, we know it's probably not as trainable as things like aerobic capacity and max strength. However, we still want to work on their efficiency, put in extra time pre-gym, pre-field, more one-on-one time or in smaller groups to be able to refine their efficiency, so they're putting force into the ground in a more appropriate manner. But also working on their capacity. Do they have the ankle stiffness? Is their soleus strong? Do they have good trunk control, pelvic control? Do they have good coordination? So really challenging on that motor control. Do they have the capacity through the hamstrings to generate the force through the glutes? So is our hip extension strength in the gym where it needs to be? And then ultimately, are we doing speed regularly enough? Are we working on the acceleration regularly enough? And are we working on their top end speed regularly enough? So identifying those athletes that need more and finding windows throughout the week to do it, whether it be if the players have 30 minutes of their own time straight after the meeting, you want to target those players and let those players know at 15 minutes into that, you want to do some dedicated speed mechanics work. So that's the load monitoring point of view. What are their game loads as well? That's really important. Typically, every player want to expose them to their game loads, the most high demanding game loads, which we can look at previous data, expose them to that stress at least twice over the preseason, around January, February, closer to games, and then once in a real game in a trial match. So they're getting 3 exposures, and hopefully 1 or 2 of those at the absolute top end. Maybe if they played 90% of game time that day, they played it was a high running demand game, and their outputs were massive. 14K, 1,500 meters of high speed run and 200 meters of sprint distance. Expose them to that. So that's really important. And then we've got our screening, how the athlete's coping with the program over the preseason season. There's things like groin squeeze, things like mobility tests need a wall in the medical room, our force plate data, so jump tests. We're using this all like ASH test, all to see how they are neurally recovering and how their muscles are recovering. And if we're falling off a cliff, we're intervening. Doesn't mean we're necessarily taking them out of training, but maybe we're adding in some individualized performance prep exercises in the gym to enhance their ability to train pain-free. Perhaps we're individualizing their injury mitigation resilience work after the performance lifts in the gym to ensure that their adductors, their calves, and hamstrings are strong enough to be able to handle the way they move on the field. So screening becomes really important, and working closely with the medical team on that information and the sports science team to ensure that we're acting on the data. Game trends, where's the game going? Where's our game going? Looking at when we play our best game, when that individual plays their best game, what is the GPS showing? What are the analysts seeing on vision? What are the coaches seeing? And learning from that, and what did the week look like for that athlete? And how can we have consistency around that preparation to obviously maximize the ability for that athlete to perform at that level more regularly, and same with the team. Is there any GPS trends to look at how when we play our best footy, is the kind of numbers showing? And sometimes they don't, and you don't want to get caught up. We want to be data informed, not data driven. So if there's no real trends, then sports science can't find anything from a performance point of view, then simply the GPS and our data just becomes a place of preparation and ensuring the athletes are healthy. Elite lifestyle for number 3. This is definitely a big area that we can work on, and I believe the best strength and conditioning coaches are elite at influencing and educating their athletes to live a elite lifestyle. Ultimately, we only see the athletes for a small percentage of their total week. So if we can influence their ability to sleep better and get to sleep earlier, have a sleep routine, work on their sleep hygiene, set up their environment that is conducive to quality deep sleep, quality REM sleep, reducing things like alcohol consumption, reducing things like blue light before they're going to sleep, and ensuring that they're getting adequate nutrition to fuel their training, and they're periodizing their nutrition just like we're periodizing our program. So educating the athletes, making sure they're engaged with the AFL performance dietitian at the club, and really valuing the importance of fuel and being in good shape over the year, and being really consistent with it is critical. We know with stress, if we're highly strung, we're not going to be able to concentrate as well. We're not going to retain information as well, and ultimately that's going to affect our ability to perform at a really high level. So working closely with the sports psychologists and ensuring that the athletes are understanding coping strategies to be an AFL athlete that is high pressure. So they need to be able to play at night, get to sleep and down regulate, but equally upregulate themselves, and obviously be at high arousal levels to perform at their highest level. And each individual will prepare differently for that mentally, as well as being able to wind down and get into that recovery phase. Recovery starts as soon as the game finishes. So we want to make sure we're maximizing their stress, their sleep, nutrition, to ensure that we're ready for the next game and the next training session. And then, of course, as part of elite lifestyle, all those 3 come into our recovery. So how do we maximize our recovery modalities, and in creating an environment where the foam roller is always accessible, Theraguns, we're using hot cold recovery. Their recovery is specific to the game demands and true where their individual program is getting them to adapt towards in that phase. So if they're looking to gain heaps of muscle mass and we're looking to progress that amount of work, then we don't want to be hindering that with ice baths and cold therapy. So that's where heat therapy to promote blood flow will be helpful, and making sure that their timing with their protein intake and carbohydrate intake will be critical. So all this feeds into a specific plan for that athlete. What was the game demands of the game, and ensure that their recovery is specific to that. So if it was a highly contested, high running game and there was lots of fatigue, it was against a rival, and it was super challenging. Night game, travel, so massive amount of neural fatigue. We know from research that contrast hot, cold, maybe 3 minutes in the ice bath, 3 minutes in the sauna, and a few rounds of that is going to help with that neural recovery. So we don't want to just be stuck into doing the same routine and same recovery every week. Make sure that the athletes are educated on, depending on what the demands were and depending on how they're feeling, that should influence their recovery methods. And work with the team on that, number 3. So it's highly collaborative, sports psychologists, the coaches, it's athlete-centered. How's the athlete feeling, their subjective wellness, as well as, of course, the dietitian. Number 4, individualize and collaborate. I've probably already touched on these two, but we want to make sure, are the athletes developing? So it's a long-term preparation. We're preparing their body for the long term. Perhaps they're not going to play many games or no games at all this year, and that's pretty clear. So we can put more physical stress into that athlete, because it's not about performing today, it's about them being able to be ready to perform in the future. And putting in extra work into their speed and their strength program to allow for that. So when they are cracking into the team, you've maximized those times where they were able to really enhance their physical capacity. Availability, making sure they're working closely with the medical team, putting in good strategies in place to ensure that the athlete's available, and reducing the risk of injuries or mitigating our risk of injuries for things like calves, hamstrings, and groins. Obviously, with the reconditioning program, as AFL Strength Conditioning coaches, we're working closely with the medical team, and the best reconditioning programs are collaborative between the medical coaches, technical, and the high performance coaches, strength and conditioning coaches. So we have a part to play with that, understanding the physical demands and the game that player needs to be able to play, and then work and also understand pathology that they're going through, what are their limitations, and educating the coaches on perhaps they're not quite doing change direction yet, but they can do straight line football drills, for example, or they might not be doing high velocity kicks yet as part of their rehab plan, but they can do like a pitching wedge type kick, for an analogy. And then lastly, collaborate with the coaches from a performance point of view. What is the game model? How do we want to play? Are we going to be a fast running team that's highly chaotic, highly reflexive, highly reactive, and agility and speed and acceleration is key, and being lean is really important to be able to travel and move across the ground really efficiently? Or are we going to be a highly contested team where we want a bit more muscle mass? We want to be really explosive and strong through the contest to be able to break through the contest and suffocate the opposition with our defensive pressure. And so understand that, and then that should influence and inform what we're prioritizing. What are our big rocks from a physical preparation point of view? So when we are going into a 6-day break, we're ensuring that we're still working on those qualities that's going to help the game. To wrap it up, it's obviously more than just simply creating a workout like a personal trainer would do, and I've done that for 8 years. This is very different. We're thinking about the future. We're thinking about where we are currently now. We're thinking about what we've done previously. So we're data informed. There's lots of science that goes into it. There's also lots of art, and making sure we've got really strong relationships with the athletes. So there's high care involved, and then we're making sure that they know no matter what, this is the best program for them and for the team. We're collaborating and we're integrating with everyone that's involved. And ultimately, we're performance driven and we're data informed. We don't want to be the other way around. Okay, so it is number one, it's all about game day and team performance and allowing the athletes to be the best that they can be. And we have a part to play to help with that puzzle of the challenge of high performance sport, where everyone's trying to achieve the same thing. Hopefully this helped inform you on what an AFL strength and conditioning coach does. I get this question all the time. If you have anyone that's interested in being an AFL strength coach, please share this episode with them. Sorry about the technical issues that we had earlier on. No doubt we'll edit this and clean it up so it's clean on the podcasting end. But for those that tuned in live, apologies. And make sure to stick around, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've got heaps of live elite world-class practitioners coming on live on the YouTube episode. I love having you guys engage and sending questions, whether you do it through our social media or you tune in live and comment to the live. So please jump in, get engaged, subscribe to the podcast, give us a rating if you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you on the next show.